All right, we are down to 4 playoff teams left. Evan Lazar, John Zannis here, talking about what we saw this NFL weekend, Evan, through the lens of a Patriots fan. And again, the freak out was almost instantaneous watching the Bills and the Chiefs, and the high-level quarterback play, of course, of Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen, who put on an absolute clinic in one of the best overall games we've ever seen played. But just watching two quarterbacks just make play after play after play with their legs, with their arm, just spectacular to watch. And as you're watching this game, if you're a Patriots fan, and I know a lot of them did, and many took to Twitter immediately after the game, and and then again today, and people have,
Yeah.
I'm sure, been texting you and talking about it and saying, "Wow, Mac can't do that." And I get it, and I get why people are doing it. So again, it's a reality. There's a real thing going on here in the NFL, and a real amazing youth movement with some spectacularly talented quarterbacks when you throw Joe Burrow and Justin Herbert in there as well. So how do you make Patriots fans feel a little better about this? After having watched what transpired this weekend.
Well, I'll first start off by saying anybody that's watched us on the Patriots post game show is not going to be surprised at all to hear John be jealous of Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes and the things that they can do running around on a football field and making ridiculous throws after ridiculous throw and arm talent and arm angles and off platform and running around and all these types of things that these quarterbacks can do.
Right.
It is, well, I don't even know what the right word is. It is um hard to watch, I guess is the best way I can put it. To
Right.
see, I don't even think, for me personally, that this is a Mac Jones conversation. This is a conversation about where the Patriots offense is as a whole compared to where these other teams are in terms of
Right.
overall team speed, wide receiver depth, schematically the way that these offenses play. You see so much wide open
Right.
offense in that game last night. Spread formations, run pass options, vertical shots down the field. And the Patriots are rolling out six offensive linemen and don't look anything like that. They just don't look anything like that from a stylistic perspective, from a talent perspective. Now, with all that being said, to circle back to Mac for a second, efficiency can still win in this league, right? And two of the quarterbacks that are remaining in this hunt right now in this race are Joe Burrow and Jimmy Garoppolo, who are not Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen, who are not broken play masters, or not guys that run around and make these 65-yard bombs down the field consistently. Those guys still win with efficiency, with smart decision making, with accuracy, with hitting receivers on the move, or hitting receivers in the right time, in the right place, and the way that they're supposed to execute their schemes. The problem is that Jimmy G's throwing to Debo Samuel and George Kittle, and Burrow's throwing to Chase and Higgins and Boyd and mixing out of the backfield. And the Patriots have Kendrick Bourne and Jacoby Myers and Nelson Aguilar, right? So my bigger concern about this team moving forward, and what I've talked about ad nauseum since the end of the season, is that the Patriots simply do not have the offensive firepower around Mac Jones to maximize an offense when their quarterback is not going to be in there,
Sure.
right? And not going to go
But
complete hero ball.
yeah, but look, I mean, there's a little more to it than that, because you're right. You cannot compare what Mac Jones is dealing with on a regular basis, and therefore you can't really gauge. It's harder to gauge his ceiling because you haven't seen him with a more talented, set of weapons or receivers around him. So it is hard. So physically, we know he doesn't have the arm talent. He doesn't have the mobility of some of those more dynamic guys. But you see someone like Joe Burrow, obviously that would be the best comp because they profiled
Yes.
closer to the same coming out of college.
I don't really understand why people think that. I put it out there on Twitter after the games on Saturday, that if
Right.
I'm a Patriots fan watching this AFC game between the Titans and the Bengals, the hope that I have as a Patriots fan is that Joe Burrow's athletic profile is not that outlandish compared to Mac Jones's. He's 6'3", 220 pounds. Mac is 6'2.5", 215 pounds. They both ran about the same 40-yard dash. I don't look at Joe Burrow and say I got a ton of pushback for it. And everybody's telling me, oh, Joe Burrow is a far superior
No, slightly
athlete than
slightly
Mac.
better arm, but not a
Yeah,
huge cannon either. He's not
no,
Justin Herbert out there.
no,
It's much more similar profiles.
yeah,
Burrow looks the part a little bit. I think people are put on with
yeah.
Mac because, of his shirtless picture, honestly. You see this
And
guy.
in
Yeah.
Mac's like rookie, Joe Burrow's in his second year. The
Yeah.
confidence is on a different level, and I also think it makes it a lot more confident when you have a guy, a
Right.
binky in Jamar Chase, that not only did you play with in college, but now you're playing with again in the NFL, and you have a guy that is a number one guy that you can really trust is
But
going to get open in the big moments.
But I'm not looking at Burrow because I would say Burrow would be your best case scenario when you're
Right.
looking at those guys because he doesn't compare physically to some of those
But you
others.
can
And
win with Burrow,
I
right?
will point out Mac Jones actually ran a slightly faster 40 time than Patrick Mahomes did coming out of
Yeah.
college,
Yeah.
even though he's just not athletically the same guy. You see what Mahomes can do, and
Right.
his agility
Yes.
and his ability to create. Even though straight line speed, he's not a speed demon, and not as physically imposing as a Josh Allen, who's literally injuring people when he runs on
Yeah.
design draws now. But no, where I was going with it is Burrow is a different case because you've seen him put up massive numbers and them get by on the strength of his quarterback play when he has weapons around him. However, if you look at Jimmy Garoppolo as a comp, San Francisco has to. I mean, look at what San Fran has, a top 3 offensive line in football, the best tight end arguably in football,
Yeah.
who could easily put up Travis Kelce numbers in a different system. He's phenomenal. He's faster than Kelce. He can do a ton after the catch. He's an absolute bulldog. Debo Samuel, who's like, oh my God, everybody wants a Debo Samuel
Oh
type
yeah.
after watching him this year. And Brandon Ayuk, who's a terrific receiver. Any one of these people would be so far and away the best receiving option on the Patriots, it wouldn't even be close. And
Right.
even given all of that, you're seeing San Francisco struggle to generate offense because they don't have one of those types of quarterbacks. So that's what you look at when you're a Patriots fan is everything could be close to perfect around him. But then what? Is he going to do what Jimmy G does with that set of weapons and that offensive line? Or is he going to do what Joe Burrow does? And that's kind of where people are stuck right here.
Yeah, and I think that that's fair. I think that for me personally, until I
Yeah.
see Mac Jones with Debo Samuel and George Kittle in a
It's hard
top
to
three
judge.
offensive
Right.
line, I don't know if he's capable or not of elevating that type of talent around him, or if he's going to be carried throughout his career by the supporting cast, by the defense, by Belichick, and all these other things that the Patriots hopefully will put around him. But my fear, if I'm a Patriots fan, is not in Mac Jones's inability to elevate and to up his game once the surrounding cast is better around him. My fear is, are the Patriots going to put that supporting cast around him or not? I have a
No
bigger
doubt.
fear of their ability to ID skill talent, their ability to draft skill talent, their ability to bring in players like that, and their willingness to, if they say to themselves, and I know last year we had the free agency spending spree and all the conversations about Bill Belichick not being willing to shell out cash for players went out the door. But meanwhile, you come away from that and the best player that you have on offense is Hunter Henry or maybe Kendrick Bourne out of that group. And neither one of those guys
No,
is Jamar Chase or Debo or any of these guys.
or even T. Higgins, it doesn't matter. You're nowhere
Right.
near
The
that
why
level. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
Jesus, look at the Bills.
Gabriel Davis just
You've got a guy who begins the
right.
season off the depth chart. He's the 4th receiving
Yeah.
option on that team.
Yeah.
Going off like that, and the Patriots are trying Christian Wilkerson late in the year to see if they could
Right.
find a spark there. So
Right.
they're on different planets in terms of their position grouping too. It's really, again, Evan, it just comes back to, I agree with that. I'd almost take that point, put it in its own bucket, talk about
Yeah.
even
That's the
even if
biggest concern to me about this
I
team moving
agree.
forward, not Mac.
I I agree 100%. Mac's not a concern because the other is a bigger concern. The
Yeah.
Mac thing always comes down to, and again, we talked about this during the year.
Yeah.
Gauging Mac's performance this year and what he did doesn't really matter. Everything is a referendum against his ceiling and how far he can take you. So the idea is if you have to be perfect around Mac Jones, and he'll never really ascend to a top 10 quarterback right now, because you can easily count off 10 guys who play right now who I don't know he could ever get to that level. So can he crack that group? Can he be in the Joe Burrow conversation where you were like, I'm happy this guy is my quarterback for the next
Well, the
10 years?
difference is
Or are you stuck? Because that's again why
yeah.
you and I were into a guy like Fields, because we don't know what kind of quarterback he's going to be, but you want to swing big sometimes at that position, because the difference maker, yes, while you can win without an elite quarterback, it's harder because everything around it has to be near perfect. So is it almost worth taking a swing at a guy who can be everything you want, or be happy you have someone like Mac who's going to be solid and who knows?
So here's the thing. I keep on going back to Joe Burrow because I really do feel like that's where the
If
Patriots
you
fans,
have Joe Burrow, you're fine.
if you want to be
Obviously, obviously.
if
Yeah.
you want to be optimistic and you want to be
Yes.
hopeful, and I get that it's a ceiling comparison. Nobody's saying that Mac Jones is as good as Joe Burrow is right now. We are saying
But
that
can he
Mac
be?
Jones' ceiling could potentially be close to what Joe Burrow is now. And looking at Joe Burrow's rookie season in terms of PFF grade, EPA per play, QBR, go
It's
right on
close.
down the line. It is really, really close to
Mac
Mac
might even be
Jones.
slightly better.
Yeah, and then you take Joe Burrow and you give him Jamar Chase, and here goes the numbers, right? So the question really boils down to me, and whether it's through the draft, whether it's through pro personnel, free agency, trade, whatever the case may be, can the Patriots go out there and identify a top playmaker for Mac Jones, put him in this offense, and get that guy to be Wes Welker, Randy Moss, Julian Edelman, Rob Gronkowski for Mac Jones, right? Can they get a guy that is on that level for Mac Jones in terms of a playmaker? And if I'm the Patriots, and I say this all the time, everybody wants to talk about the defense and how they ended the season. They gave up 47 points against Buffalo. It was bad. The number one priority for the Patriots in the offseason is surrounding Mac Jones with more skill talent. It is the number one priority. You look across the league right now, this Final Four could not paint that picture any clearer for you. And the fact that all four of these quarterbacks, some of them have multiple number one weapons, right? Not
Yeah.
just one number one weapon. You look at Matthew Stafford and Cooper Kupp, and then he also has Odell Beckham in the
And
back
he would have
end.
had Robert
Right,
Woods, and you don't
right,
know if they make the Beckham trade if Woods doesn't get hurt. But
right,
again, you're
right.
loaded there. You're loaded
Yeah,
there,
yeah.
obviously.
Kansas City's got Hill and Kelsey. We just went over the weapons in Cincinnati and in San Francisco. Those quarterbacks are set up for the best possible chance to succeed. And if you look across the league, and this is a year, this is multiple years of this trend existing. The teams that throw the football the best win the most games. Point blank. We are not dealing in 1985 anymore, when you can run the ball and play great defense and play good in the kicking game and just go about it in such a complementary three phases type of way. We are not in that day and age in the NFL anymore. The game that we saw last night, the game that we saw earlier in the day on Sunday between Tom Brady and Matthew Stafford, that is now what you need to do to win in the postseason. I know people are going to point to San Francisco and Cincinnati and say those teams won 19 points for Cincinnati. Was it 13 points for San Francisco? And I'm going to tell you that at some point in time, whether it's in the championship round or it's in the Super Bowl, one of those teams is going to have to go toe to toe, right? One of those teams' offenses is going to have to put up more than 19 points to win a championship. So, yeah,
Well,
you can win one game in a blizzard in Green Bay like that. You can win one game when Ryan Tannehill throws 3 interceptions against Tennessee like that in the postseason. But can you win multiple games like that in the playoffs with your passing offense not elevating itself?
right.
The answer is no in
Yeah.
today's NFL.
And again, one thing that some of those teams have in common is the amount of draft capital that they continue to expend towards those weapons. And you and I have talked about this offline, Evan. And again, if you ever, any and all draft segments you allow me on through this offseason when we're previewing everything that we're
Yeah.
talking about, again, my philosophy is now at this point completely changed and very simple. You must draft a receiver with one of your first 2 picks every year, because that's where you're getting that talent. You can't ignore it. And again, they took a swing this year. This is actually proof for why you need to invest in the draft. You are spending through the nose for middle tier talent in free agency,
Right.
or if one of those elite guys gets there, you're in a bidding war and it's going to crush your cap. And it's proven to not work to go spend big money on those guys. The
In the
ones that
trades,
work
you have
are
to
the
be
ones
able
that
to
you
outbid people, right?
you
Like,
can't, you
yeah,
got it. It's always a challenge, but here they're
yeah,
just sitting there available. And again,
yeah,
once you get past that middle of the second round, you're just not finding those game changing talents. Might you find plug and play guys and diamonds in the rough? Of course, but you got to invest early and often. You look at a team like the Chiefs, they keep taking swings, even though those guys, Robinson, Hardman, aren't hitting. They're investing second round picks in these guys, trying to keep it going because you recognize you can't hit them all. You can't do N'Keal Harry one and done, hope that it works. You have to
right.
keep going back to the well here in the hopes that a few of them turn into these guys while you can still afford them. Other than that, you're kind of stuck where they were last year, trying to patch some holes and really not doing a great job of it, even though they spent a ton of money in free agency.
Yeah, we had Miguel on
Yep,
Patriots beat Pat's cap the other
Pat's
day,
cap.
and he said, "Look, Calvin Ridley is a great option for them. He's only $11 million against the cap. He's a great player, but the problem is that what if Philadelphia wants Calvin Ridley? What if Miami wants Calvin Ridley? All these teams have better draft capital than you, so it's a lot harder to go out and win a bidding war." Philadelphia's got 3 first-round picks. Are you going to be able to win a
Yep.
bidding war with them for Calvin Ridley if he comes available? So the easiest way is obviously through the draft. And as we get into the draft and talk about these prospects, I started working on a lot of them today. And you talk about Jamison Williams, Chris Olave, Garrett Wilson, Traylon Burks, Drake London, John Mechie, and Wandell Robinson on day 2. Names I'm probably forgetting off the top of my head right now that I didn't mention. They are available in droves. Like, they are all over the place. And all you got to do is identify the one that works for your system and plug him in and get the best out of him that you possibly can. But the droves of talent at wide receiver are back in this draft. Maybe there isn't a Jamar Chase or a top 5 bona fide, Calvin Johnson, Randy Moss type of draft pick in this one, but there are from, 10 to 65. There are probably 8 or 9 receivers that are
Good.
going to
Go get
go.
two of them. Right.
So you got to be able to find one and go get one.
Particularly again, if you're thinking, all right, if you, and again, this is where if that pool is roughly the same guy and you think, okay, I need more, I need to take more swings. This is again where potentially advocating for trading back,
Yeah,
stockpiling second round picks, take 2 receivers there and see what you get. And
right,
again, it's not one-sided, oh, receiver is the only position. It's just they've had success filling other positions of
right.
need other places, whether through free agency or later on in the draft. You just don't find these guys anywhere else. And as you said, it's harder in free agency. So this is going to be a big storyline of the offseason. I know people are
Yeah.
going to dispute whether or not it's all about the weapons, but as you said,
It's
and it's
not all about the weapons, but
but they need it because
it's easier to
they're
fill
not
the
getting
other holes.
past it. Right.
Right. It's easier to fill the other holes
Exactly.
in other places. And I have so much more faith in Bill Belichick to find some linebackers that can play in his system that maybe are a little bit more faster and more explosive, more new age, to add another corner in the secondary and have a defense that clearly fell apart at the end of the season and the playoffs obviously was terrible, but also had a lot of injuries and a lot of circumstance and
Yep.
context that's necessary of how that defense completely fell apart. And I have so much more faith in Bill's ability to identify talent, plug in talent, find players that fit the system on that side of the football, and fix the defense through the second, third, and fourth rounds of the draft. Right
Right.
now, what I would love to see them do, because we talk about those top 3, Aguilar, Bourne, and Myers, those guys are most likely all going to be on the roster next year. N'Keal Harry might not be on the roster, probably shouldn't be on the roster next year. And Gunnar Olszewski is also a restricted free agent, and I'm not 100% sold that they're going to tender him to anything either. So you are looking at a very realistic possibility that you do have 2 open roster spots for wide receivers. You have a 4th spot and you have a 5th spot. Now, hopefully you draft a guy early and you put him in that number 1 spot and everybody else trickles down. But even if you go for a guy like a Chris Olave or like a Traylon Burks or like a Jahan Dotson or one of these guys at the top of the draft, somebody like a Slade Bolden or a Sky Moore or some of these other guys that are probably going to go on a day 3 or maybe even undrafted in certain cases, and just plug in 2 of those guys, right? That you get, and you can get your Patriot prototype in a Slade Bolden, who's your, Julian Edelman, Wes Welker clone. You can get that sort of guy on day 3, but on day 1, you got to take a big swing and get a player that is a bona fide big time playmaker. And I that's really where they're at right now with the Patriots. And the thing I consistently come back to, I saw a stat today that 85% of the time, the team that averages a higher expected points added per dropback, expected points added per pass, wins the game 85% of the time. So the team that throws the ball the best wins, point blank. And the Patriots just are not a good enough passing team to be able to win in an NFL where the team that throws the ball the most effectively or the most efficiently wins 85% of
Uh,
the games.
And again, you're hoping that whatever's happening with the Patriots is happening because that's how the kind of chips fell,
Yeah.
in terms of their roster building and not some choice or stubbornness. Because if there is a failure to recognize this, and I know there's pushback. Anytime you say you need the quarterback, you need to be able to pass, people will point to the one outlier situation where that wasn't the
Right.
case and say,
When
well,
San
look,
Francisco won a
you
game in
know,
a blizzard with 2 blocked kicks and
yeah,
all sorts of craziness happening in Green Bay, and everybody says, "Oh, well, just look at San Francisco." It's like they played in 0-degree
I
weather.
know.
It was snowing. They had 2 block kits on special teams. Like if you want to have all those factors play into your favor to win one playoff game, then be my guest. If you want to
Right.
actually go on a Super Bowl run, then you're going to have to upgrade your
You
players
have
around
to
that.
do it. I don't want to hear arguments to the contrary. This is
Yeah.
the direction that it's gone. And again, there's no reason to fight it at this point. And the Patriots need help. They need to load up. But where we began the conversation was
Yeah.
with Max. So I'll put you on the spot
Okay.
as we circle back to it. Do
Yes.
you believe, given the right, because again, this is the guesswork portion of it. Do you
Yeah.
believe, given not Jamar Chase level weapons, but good legitimate weapons where the passing game can open up to utilize all of Mac Jones' strengths as a passer? Can he get to a Joe Burrow level?
Yes, I believe he can. If the Patriots open up the offense, put him in a spread system like he was running at Alabama, like we saw last night with Kansas City and Buffalo, spread the field, give him defined pictures, let him get the football out, let him attack one-on-one matchups with good accuracy,
Right.
and they get him somebody that can win down the field at a high level. Chris Olave, Jahan Dotson, one of these big-time vertical threats in the draft. And I'm not just talking about running the straight line and beat a guy over the top, right? We're talking about 3
Right.
levels of big playability. If they can get him one of those guys and they can adapt and adjust their system, then I have all the faith in the world that Mac Jones can pilot an offense that it finishes top 5 in pass DVOA or something like that. But they have to get him the help, and they have to be willing, from a coaching standpoint, from a Josh McDaniels standpoint, they have to be willing to evolve here. If they're not willing to evolve and they're still going to run Jakob Johnson out there with the 6th offensive lineman and the 2 tight ends, and they're going to run all these heavy groupings out there. And the biggest problem is when you run those heavy groupings, Mike on like take the 6 offensive line package out of it. Let's
Right.
just talk about 21 personnel. Jakob Johnson is not a threat on the field. He is a nothing. So you're
So
playing
you've
4
got
on 5.
Mac and Yaki. You're taking 2
Right.
guys out. Yeah,
Right.
right.
So you're taking 2 guys out. Exactly. And so if you don't start threatening every blade of grass and have everybody on your roster that is able to go out there and make a play with the ball in their hands other than the quarterback, then you're putting your offense in a huge bind in terms of
Yeah.
what you can do. There is a time and there's a place for the fullback and for the 6-0 line packages when you're on the goal line or it's 3rd and 1, or if you go up in a matchup where the other team is playing 220-pound linebackers and you just want to play bully ball for a game. There are certainly times and matchups and situations where those things can be effective. As a stylistic whole, as an offensive system, those things are extinct. You
Yeah.
cannot play football like that anymore for 17 games. You
Yeah.
can play that way for
Sure.
a half. You can play that way for a quarter. For 17 games, you got to be different. You got to be more innovative. You got to be more creative than that. And you got to start opening up the offense some more to some of these big time
Yeah.
playmakers that we see in droves everywhere else.
That stuff is nice because you want it to be a tool in your shed when you want to
Right,
go heavy, when you want to be able to
right,
muscle the other team, when you need to win battles up front. Yes, nice to have that. But again, the fact that you won some games doing just that does not justify doing it over and over again. And again, no reason to point to, well, did you see how they beat blank the first time? Again, game has evolved. Patriots need to as well. We are not even going to get into the topic of whether or not, if they do decide to start selecting these types of players in the draft, whether they're actually capable of doing it. We'll see who's still standing after this offseason shakes
right.
out in terms of personnel and who's going to be making these decisions. But again, another argument or another conversation for another time. We'll wrap this one up. Thanks for watching again. For those out there, please like the video. Please subscribe to the Patriots Press Pass YouTube channel. We'll have much more Patriots related content throughout the offseason. Thanks a lot.